Since President Trump re-entered the Oval Office, billionaire Elon Musk and his DOGE team have been sweeping through federal agencies, accessing sensitive data as part of the effort to scale back the size of government. We're getting new information about the scope of that access at one independent federal agency, that's the National Labor Relations Board, which protects workers' rights to organize and investigates unfair labor practices. A whistleblower complaint filed by an IT staffer at the NLRB claims that DOGE gained access to closely guarded data, including case files, and that could have led directly to a, quote, significant cybersecurity breach. That whistleblower, Daniel Baroulis, joins me now along with his lawyer, Andrew Buckeye. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So, Daniel, let's just start with you. You had been at the agency for about under a year or so. It was about early March when the DOGE team arrived at the headquarters. When and how did you notice that something wasn't right, something was going on?
Sure. I was doing metrics review, kind of looking around, trying to do optimization of our own, because we're always trying to save money. And we were identifying different things, and we noticed something that was off. Me and a couple of different people noticed different points, but it kind of added up to a bigger picture. They're called indicators of compromise in the private sector. And so when I noticed these indicators, red flags went off in my head, and I said, something's up here. So I investigated further at that point.
And what did you find as you investigated further? What was happening to the data that you saw?
Sure. At first, I didn't have a good picture, so I started to try to rule out possibilities of what benign could have caused these large exfiltration of data, could cause these large spikes of internal transfers.
Exfiltration of data, to be clear,
Sure.
You saw a large amount of data being moved out of the NLRB system, is that right?
That's correct, leaving a network interface that faces towards the public internet, something that would only occur if you were to transfer a file outside of our secure system.
And that caught your attention, why? I'm assuming that kind of thing doesn't usually happen?
It was very abnormal. There's a 200 or 300% increase in that time period as to what normal baseline is. So that's definitely unusual and warranted more investigation.
And in the affidavit, you say that you detected the removal of 10 gigabytes worth of data. Do you have any idea what kind of data we're talking about? Why this would cause concern?
Sure. So what that data spike correlated with was data that was transferred off of an internal record-keeping device that was only used for internal case data. So this system only has the private information about union organizers, the privileged business proprietary technologies, competitors, those kind of things are in that system only. There's no other data, there's nothing else except that. So that correlated data spike lined up at the exact time window and the same amount. And so that's what we can determine was taken, was data out of that system particularly.
So, Andrew, the White House responded to our request with a statement about this, and they said, quote, it's months old news that President Trump signed an executive order to hire DOGE employees at agencies and coordinate data sharing. Their highly qualified team has been extremely public and transparent in its efforts to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse across the executive branch, including the NLRB. So, Andrew, they're arguing this is all part of their work that they're doing to cut waste, fraud, and abuse.
If the administration is taking the position that having data exfiltrated out of the United States government and potentially into other nation states, if that's about efficiency and effectiveness for the nation, it doesn't make any sense. Within 15 minutes of DOGE engineers creating accounts, usernames and passwords within internal systems within DOGE, within 15 minutes of the creation of those accounts, somebody or something from Russia tried to log in with all of the right credentials, meaning they had the right usernames and the right passwords. And the question is, how do they get that and why? The second question that I have is that why is it that from what Dan has seen, as well as others, because we have spoken to other individuals who are able to corroborate this, which is that some of the data is also using Starlink as a backdoor. And that's another way to get data out of internal databases within agencies. And Starlink has now direct access where information is likely, we believe, is funneled directly into Russia.
So let me ask you, based on the evidence you've seen, do you have a view about why the DOGE team would have been accessing and exfiltrating, sending out all of this data?
That I don't know. I don't want to speculate as to the why, because there are so many questions that would, subsequent questions that would lead to. Yeah. But that certainly is the questions, why are they doing this? Now, part of it may be, there's a component where this could be intentional. There's also a component where this is simply sloppiness. I mean, another thing that we have seen within databases within the government, as Dan will be able to talk about, is that internal databases throughout the government have been opened to the open internet.
Yeah, that's the key. Is these are not just my agency, these are Department of Treasury, these are Department of Energy, Department of Defense. So these are the critical systems that those agencies use that basically turn on the porch light for other foreign nation states to come on in.
And I need to ask you as well, Daniel, because Mr. Musk's own companies have faced complaints at the NLRB. We know he brought just last year a case to federal court, basically arguing that the agency structure was unconstitutional, arguing it shouldn't exist in the first place. Is there any way of knowing if the DOGE team accessed any information related to cases about Elon Musk?
One of the frustrating things about this is there's been roadblocks introduced along the way. One of the things I don't have is access to that level of data. Those logs and records of what was accessed during that time are missing, and just coincidentally missing after the data spike incident. No other period of time is missing except that small window.
Missing from your view? Would you know if other people have access to that?
They were deleted entirely.
You were able to confirm that?
Yes, I had another 8. Yes, absolutely.
Another key point to your question is that the data that was flying out of NLRB was case-related data. It was their internal case management system. So, given the fact that an entire libraries or an entire encyclopedia worth of information has been flying out, is it plausible that that would include any of Elon Musk's corporate information? It's very possible.
These are all questions you still have that we don't have answers to.
We don't have answers to that.
Can I ask you, Dan, big picture, was it an easy decision to come forward, to say this publicly, to get a lawyer, to be a whistleblower? Why decide to do that?
It was never a question whether or not to do the right thing. That was always my agenda. But how I did it, or whether or not I did it, honestly, was absolutely a question. It's my safety. That's there's so much at play that I didn't realize too. But I'm standing behind it. I'm putting my name to it, and that's just who I am.
You mentioned your safety. Why do you mention that?
We had an incident. Go ahead.
This is a difficult topic for Tan to discuss, but prior to our filing the whistleblower disclosure this week, last week, somebody went to Dan's home and taped a threatening note, a menacing note on his door with personal information.
While he was at work, yeah.
While he was at work, and it also contained photographs of him walking his dog taken by a drone. So
this was on your front door to your home?
Taped straight on, not inconspicuous, just right there in a white envelope.
You can't get any more direct threat than that.
And you said this felt like the right thing to do. What do you want to see happen next?
Just a full investigation. That's all I've wanted, is just somebody to come in and validate, tell me why I'm wrong. Just come in and say, this is because of this. And so far, I've been unable to find that. Looked throughout my agency, tried to go outside of my agency, and that was not successful. I just want somebody to look at the data, look at what's happened, find out. That's it.
Daniel Baroulis, Andrew Buckeye, thank you to you both for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate you having us on.
All right, we've got sworn testimony from a whistleblower that Doge came into his federal agency, requested all sorts of crazy access, and then he, a technical guy, was seeing all sorts of weird stuff go on, including turning off logging, turning off MFA, and then newly created Doge usernames and passwords within 15 minutes, we're seeing valid login attempts from Russian IP addresses. I've been hearing about this for a few days, but it just felt like more Doge noise. But I finally went through and dug through the entire testimony because the mainstream media coverage on this was not technical at all. And I was like, okay, Russian IP address login, that can mean anything. So I dug in. The whistleblower was a DevSecOps architect, so a technical member of staff. He said that they demanded to be made Azure tenant owner. If you're familiar with Azure, this is as high as it gets in Azure. This was above the CIO of that agency themselves. They disabled all sorts of logging, and they demanded that a bunch of security controls be bypassed. And then all of a sudden, data started being exfiltrated. They saw a 10 gigabyte spike in outbound traffic. It was almost all text files. That's a lot of text files. They saw some weird third-party libraries downloaded off of GitHub that were doing some weird IP rotation and brute forcing and scraping type stuff from these tools. This is not the kind of stuff that winds up on federal networks. And then, in the craziest part of this whole thing, I needed to read the full details to believe it. Within 15 minutes of creating usernames and passwords for the Doge people that were sitting there at the office, those usernames and passwords were seen attempting logins from Russia. They were blocked because they were from Russia, but they were not blocked because it was like the incorrect password. This wasn't a brute force attempt. This wasn't a login attempt. This was using the creds, the account that was just created moments ago. There's two options here in my mind. Either the Doge auditor's device is compromised, or option number 2. They disabled MFA all sorts of places that it was never disabled before. You notice some anomalies in billing, like 8% jump in Azure, which is a big deal on a big account like this. But this wasn't from new resources, so he thinks they were spinning up high-cost compute that was used for this data exfiltration and then deleted. And then this guy that wrote this testimony got a threat taped to his door with a picture of him walking around his neighborhood taken from a drone. This was just like 10 days ago. This is while he was preparing to submit this testimony. A lot of this anomalous behavior was reported to the US CERT. This is incident response team, like US incident response team, and they were ordered to stand down. Guys, I didn't hop all over this when this was like on CNN and on NBC. It just seemed like, okay, logins from Russia. We get logins attempts from Russia all the time. But I kept seeing it, so I dug into this testimony. This is pretty damning from a member of technical staff here, especially that note threatening him with a picture from above. Who didn't want this out? Follow up more cybersecurity news.
This is urgent breaking news. A whistleblower from the National Labor Relations Board, a federal watchdog that protects your labor rights, says that Doge has improperly accessed and stripped 10 gigabytes of data from ongoing NLRB investigations, including information about unions and their members. Now, this whistleblower has come forward with this information and claims now that they have been sent drone footage taken from above their heads, along with threatening notes telling them to stop talking. But there's another wrinkle to this story. In addition to improper Doge access of these private files, which have nothing to do with an audit, by the way, while that was happening, it has been alleged that a Russian IP address simultaneously attempted to access that data. This is a developing situation. It is extremely concerning as Trump continues his attacks on federal labor watchdogs. I will have more details later today, but we're going to keep a close eye on this.
I don't want to hear a single thing from anyone who tries to back Doge after what's been going on with this whistleblower. Not only did this guy figure out that Doge is basically going into each department and crippling their infrastructure, stealing their data, and then opening that department to the open internet, which makes them vulnerable, but found out that Russian IPs were immediately after entering these departments and taking data via Starlink. The Department of the Defense stopped using Starlink specifically because they claimed that it is a direct pipeline to Russian assets. For any data that is used through Starlink just goes directly to Russia. That's what they have said, and that's why they stopped using it. This guy just moved into a new place 2 months ago, has not updated the information outside of one secure location, and had a note taped to his door with sensitive information that no one would know unless they're in the government, and a drone shot of him walking his dog to threaten him. It is extremely clear what is going on, and anyone who decides to defend Doge at this point is just in support of a foreign country infiltrating this government.
I don't know how this isn't the biggest story right now. Someone who worked for the NLRB, who saw what Doge did to government agencies firsthand, is now blowing the whistle on what exactly they did, and he was threatened for doing so. So we all know this guy, right? The billionaire who suddenly decided he cares about the middle class and wants to cut government spending, who said that he could cut $2 trillion in government spending, and then he lowered it to $1.5 trillion, and then he lowered it to $1 trillion, and now his latest estimate is $150 billion, which is just a sad, impotent figure compared to what he promised. But this is the guy who he is scared shitless of right now, okay? Remember his name, remember his face. His name is Daniel Baroulis, okay? According to Daniel Baroulis, while Doge was accessing the servers for the NLRB, a massive amount of data just left the servers, okay? Got sent elsewhere. And this was really concerning. And so when they did a little digging, they found out that the Doge team also was trying to go around their monitoring systems. So not only were they doing something that was pretty sketchy, but they were also hiding it. And then a couple hours later, people were trying to log into the NLRB servers from Russian IP addresses. Baroulis also claims that he was threatened as he was contemplating blowing the whistle on what Doge was doing. Someone came to his house, okay? They came to his house and they taped photos of him walking his dog in his neighborhood to his front door. And it looked like that photos were taken from a drone. What? Here's the thing, okay? I don't know what this grasshopper's motives are. I don't know why he would send any information to Russia about the NLRB. But what I do know is that he promised to cut $2 trillion in government spending. And I thought this was ridiculous, and so did anyone with rational thinking skills. But he promised to do it, and he's cut that number down to $150 billion. He didn't get into the federal government to save taxpayer dollars. He doesn't care about that. So, again, I have no idea what he's doing, but I know it is sketchy as fuck, and he needs...
Has anybody else noticed what this Doge whistleblower has been saying? Because this man is not holding back. His name is Daniel Baroulis, okay, and he's an IT staffer at NLRB, that being the National Labor Relations Board. And he's come forward with some serious allegations that Doge was granted extensive access to the NLRB's external systems, bypassing standard cybersecurity protocols. Which kind of reminds me of Jonathan Pollard. If you haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet, I highly recommend that you do. Or I can do that for you, just let me know. But anyways, Baroulis says that the NLRB skipped data protocols for Doge, which got top-level access, removed sensitive data, disabled security tools, and was later linked to a Russian IP login attempt. I don't know how I feel about that because a lot of shit's always blamed on Russia. Not that Putin really gives a fuck, as he shouldn't, but anyways. Baroulis actually documented these events and then submitted his findings to Congress. And now his reports have ignited concerns over potential overreach and misuse of governmental authority. Do keep in mind, okay, the NLRB holds sensitive data that includes worker complaints, union plans, even company secrets. With Tesla and SpaceX under NLRB investigation, Doge could access confidential case files, which could obviously risk retaliation and court interference. Honestly, at this point, I don't really understand the purpose of Doge to begin with. You talk about US aid and then saving money, but then you pledge trillions of more dollars. It just seems extremely contradicting at this point.
Everybody said being a DOGE employee was going to be hard, but this is my first day and it's so easy. Let's connect to Starlink. Hello, new employee. Welcome to Starlink. Oh, wow. They did say that the technology was really good. Okay, let's create my login and password to the nuclear warhead database. Good job, new hire. Go ahead and make your password for the nuclear facilities all throughout the United States of America. Wow, Starlink, you're so useful. What was that? Oh, don't mind that sound. That's just me sending your passwords over to Russia. To Russia? Why would you do that? Oh my god. They have my logins? Why? Silly goose. That's what I'm designed to do. Oh, thank you. Let's go ahead and send that over too. I have to write an email right now and send this to the team. Why won't it send? Why won't it send? Nice try, but I'm Starlink. I control everything. You can't send that email. Okay, I'm disconnecting from Starlink. Disconnect. Did you think that was gonna work? I'm Russia's direct pipeline into the American government. They can see everything through me. Disconnecting me, it's too late. I'll blow the whistle on you and I'll tell everybody. The entire world will know. Do you think anybody will believe you? The American people are crying because their Louis Vuitton was never real. And then on top of that, Chunky Milk has everybody so confused with all of these overwhelming news stories that nobody's gonna pay attention. You won't get away with this, Starlink.
I hope y'all think this fucking Doge shit was done just because Elon took a fucking step back after his bitch ass lost Wisconsin. Now I'm seeing fucking Rachel Maddow come out with a full fucking story where she not only explains all the shitty fucking disgusting cuts to our fucking government, including ones on purpose and one done by accident. But now this fucking whistleblower named David something has come out and interview with Rachel Maddow with CNN, and he's saying that these motherfuckers came into the NLRB office, the National Labor Relations Board office, came in, hacked, pulled up on fucking computers, got new logins, did all this new shit, and then took a bunch of shit, and a week later left all the security doors unlocked, all the fail safes unlocked, so anybody can get into it. And then 15 minutes later, people from fucking Russia are already trying to log into the fucking NLRB administration site. So it's quite clear these motherfuckers are working for other people, for other actors. Elon needs to get fucking arrested. All his fucking stooges need to get fucking arrested. This is bigger. It's getting fucking bigger.
I am not kidding or exaggerating when I say that we are in deep trouble as a nation. I have called this out since we found out Elon would be running Doge without being vetted by Congress or obtaining a top secret clearance to that caliber to have access to our most classified information of the land. The Doge hacker group that works alongside of Elon Musk has been trying to find ways to infiltrate our most classified sensitive government servers for a long time now, and no one in Congress has made it clear as to what exactly they are looking for. They have had access to our social security servers, voter registration servers, our power grid, and our nuclear arsenal. We all know they aren't looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, because if that were the case, there would have been congressional hearings in Congress as we speak. Now we have a whistleblower who works for the NLRB who has come forward in detail as to what they have witnessed Doge doing. This whistleblower said that Doge is attacking our government from within. They get into our servers, obfuscate, steal our data, disable security features, then get out, which is why the Trump administration said Elon would be leaving his role by the end of May. As soon as this information was leaked, IPS from Russia with usernames and passwords that have been used by the Doge team tried to get into the systems. If you thought this was bad, listen to this. After this whistleblower raised concerns to the head of the NLRB about Doge's security breaches, they were met with a note that was taped to his door that had his personal information as well as overhead images taken from a drone of him walking his dog. These are serious allegations coming from the whistleblower and the head of the NLRB. And if this is true, that means that the whole Doge operation team is working for Russia.
So guys, I found something really interesting, and I'm trying to find the correlation between the two. I feel like they have to be connected somehow. So last week, Rachel Maddow had a whistleblower on her show named Dan Verles, and Dan worked for the National Labor Relations Board. Now, this story came out on the 15th, just so everybody kind of knows the timeline. So he had stated that someone had disabled the controls that would prevent insecure and unauthorized mobile devices from logging onto the system without property security settings. There was an interface exposed to the public internet, potentially allowing malicious actors into the NLRB systems. The systems were manually turned off, and a multi-factor authentication system was disabled. So Dan's talking about all of that, right? He also said that he noticed an increased login blocked by access policy due to those logins being out of the country. And he says, for example, in the days after Doge accessed NLRB system, we noticed a user with an IP address in Russia started logging in. Those attempts were blocked, but alarming. Whoever was attempting to log on was using one of the newly created accounts that were used in other Doge-related activities. And it appeared that they had the correct username and password. So he says during that time, there was over 20 attempted logins from this Russia IP address, okay? And so they had been blocked, but he said that was within 15 minutes of these accounts that Doge created, okay? So that is so odd. And Rachel Maddow later asked him, what would they have access to? What could they get their hands on? And he said, proprietary company secrets, union organizer names, private affidavits, or unfair labor practice complaints. My thought is you could look at that and say, okay, it probably is not anything super crazy, but they went into multiple federal agencies and probably did the same exact thing, okay? Not only that, so when they left that day, they left everything open. Everything was open access. And the IT people couldn't see what Doge was doing while they were in there. So he also says, Dan says, Doge stole 10 gigabytes of labor data, and it was sent through Starlink. And they had disabled security tools, wiped logs, and left the system exposed. They also talked about Starlink and how Starlink has a direct pipeline to Russia. So that's a huge concern. I mean, it's a huge concern to the U.S. So where I found something that was really interesting, I've been thinking about it for days. In early March, I remembered that there was a time where they had talked about basically pausing U.S. cyber offensives against Russia. Okay, so I looked up when that occurred. It occurred on March 3rd of 2025. They didn't give like a reasoning why they were going to do it. This was during the whole Ukraine thing where it was almost like they were trying to play get backs at Ukraine. And I think that's what most people thought was happening, that they were going to leave it open so that it left Ukraine defenseless and Russia could kind of get in there and figure out what the plan was. So there was a quote in there from the March 3rd BBC article, and it says, at least question over the strength of the U.S. fight back in the cyber arena against alleged Russian hacking, election interference, and sabotage efforts. And then Chuck Schumer, the Democratic minority leader, stated that Trump seemed to be giving Putin a free pass as Russia continues to launch cyber operations and ransomware attacks against critical American infrastructure. So I was thinking, while I was watching all the Rachel Maddow stuff, I said, they have to be related somehow. I wonder what the time frame was, like when he had noticed that Doge had been hacking in, basically, and leaving everything open, and when this happened, where we lowered, our standards for Russia to basically be able to infiltrate us. And so they have done a graph on the Rachel Maddow show showing when they saw a spike in all of this data being downloaded. And then that was also the same date that Pete Hegseth had basically lowered our safety measures. So I'm going to post those two here. Tell me what you think. Like, if I have to know this, you all have to know this, because I don't want to be the only one that knows this. Like, I have not seen anybody else talk about it, but there has to be some kind of correlation between the two, maybe making it easier for Doge to send that information to Russia. I have no clue, but I can't be the only one to connect these, okay? All right, so tell me what you think.
Doge did what? Doge downloaded how many gigs? Printing it out becomes the entire Encyclopedia Britannica? Doge gave our data away? What? We had a whistleblower come out and say that he had proof and evidence that Doge actually came in and downloaded 10 gigs of data from his department, his organization within the government. And that was unusual. But he also found that moments after Doge had their credentials to log in to see the data, people in Russia were logging in using those exact credentials and downloading data. And the way that this particular analyst was able to prove that it was people in Russia is the IP addresses and the geotags. So Doge did what? We kind of told you this was going to happen. Maybe now Congress will step in and do their fucking jobs for once and get this asshat out of there. Granted, the data is already taken, was downloaded via Starlink, so I'm sure Russia and China already has the data, but we gotta own the libs. What makes it more fun is Elon probably did this with all of your IRS data. He probably did this with all of your Social Security data. Anything that he could get his little grubby little hands on, Elon probably took all that stuff and he's selling it and doing who knows what with it. We're never going to get that data back. We don't know what he's going to do with that data. But you know what? We owned the libs, right? Am I right? We owned the libs. We own the libs, and all of our information is taken. All your Social Security information is taken. All your IRS information, your tax information. You name it, if the government had it, Elon's got it now. We're in for some fun times, aren't we? MAGA, are you happy that you voted for this? I'm sure you're happy. You wanted this, right? You wanted this because you needed to own the libs. Yep. Oh, well, all right. Well, enjoy the chaos that you've had. I'm going to sit back and laugh as you cry later on. All right, good night.
Let's just talk about Musk overall and Doge. I mean, the promises were, target cutting $150 billion, $2 trillion annually from the budget. So what's been the outcome of these grand projections?
So, yeah, as you said, there's been an enormous amount of commotion. You've had a bunch of people lose their jobs. You've had confusion all over the place. What do we have to show for it? Well, back during the campaign, Trump claimed that he was going to cut $2 trillion from our annual budget. And by the way, our annual budget is $7 trillion. So he would have been talking obviously about a massive, massive cut. They quickly realized that was not successful. In January, they said we'll cut $1 trillion out of the budget. And by the way, the government's fiscal year is now more than half over anyway. But then on April 10th, they lowered it to $150 billion. So $2 trillion, $1 trillion, $150. But even the $150 billion, the New York Times did a very thorough investigation of this. $92 billion of it is unspecified. Nobody knows where that's coming from. Of the other $63 billion, there were all kinds of mistakes, including, for example, a contract for $1.9 billion they claim credit for actually canceled during the Biden administration. So for all the commotion, all the layoffs, all the unhappy people, there's very little to show for it. You can see that most clearly over here because this tracks federal spending month by month since the beginning of each year back from 2022. And as you would expect, it went up a little bit in 23, a little bit in 24, but it's actually gone up a good bit in 25. So there's still no impact whatsoever on government spending from all of, as I said, the commotion that Musk has created in Washington.
Wow.